like this is the entry point to talk about how women can lift heavy things, and or how men can lift heavy things while women cannot do. I'm so sorry. This is like very, I don't know how to describe it, but why is it only this is the point of discussion? But there are other things that women are able to do that also men cannot do, and men can do things that women cannot. Like, why do we have to put all this type of segregation? Like, men can do this, women cannot do that, because it's supposed, when we talk about a society, it's supposed to be integrated roles. It's not like I can do this, you cannot do this. I can go to medicine school for a woman. There is lots of structural, there's lots of obstacles that the society puts in front of a man and a woman that they cannot go. Like, for example, when I talk from my context, where I come, like simple acts, like people, for example, we're not expecting men to cry in public, but we can expect this from women. This is like suppressing certain people from doing like a simple act of crying or laughing or moving around, and to, like, this is what I was saying, minimal acts. So why is it always about physical ability? Because if we are going to make this comparison, women deliver babies, which is one of the painful experiences around, all over, when it comes to body. But men and cannot do this. So I mean, the physical ability is one of the things that we like need to assess, but it's not. It doesn't have to be always the entry point.
Dua, I'm interested because you talked about obstacles put in the place of women by society. You obviously see that society has a role in this. I just wonder who else thinks that the problems experienced by women with regards sexism is down to society or down to something else. Suzanne, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that society plays a big role. These are prescribed gender roles. Sometimes, depending on the context, they can be very strict. I'll give you an example that I was talking to a few friends the other day, and we were talking about a friend of ours, a woman who's a very successful woman in her work, and because of the situation in their family, her husband is the stay-at-home husband who takes care of her small child. And it was, even though I was speaking to people who were very enlightened, it became a matter of a joke that he was staying home. So sexism is not something that just impacts women; it impacts men as well. And I think, as Doa said, we can't really talk about the biological. We can't only be limited by the biological differences. I think feminism and fighting against sexism is about giving people choices so that they can have opportunities. They can have equal opportunities, and they are able to make a variety of choices that are not prescribed by society. And we're living in a rapidly changing world, and I think that it's time that we really re-examined some of these very strict gender roles that say men are supposed to do this and women are supposed to do that, and allow people to make life choices that are best suited for them.
Gisela, in Mexico, what's your perspective on who puts these obstacles in the way of women? Do you think it's down to society? Do you think women, in some ways, don't help themselves?
I think it has a lot to do on education mainly, and that goes through almost every institution, like even the state, where women have been shut off for a lot of years. Until now, we're kind of getting even. And religion, definitely for me, it's a big factor, especially for what I lived, and family roles and education. And then I asked myself the question, and in a very controversial but actual subject, what is the role of feminism? Because I think everything is said. There's over 100 years that we've been working on this. There's theory, there's practice, there's philosophy, there's deconstruction, there's books. But how are we communicating them to a generation of millennials that get informed through the internet? And that's why Emma Watson and Beyonce and all these pop feminist like statements have had a lot of impact, even if they are not as deep and they are not as thorough as they could be on gender deconstruction. But I ask myself that question. if it's all about education, if media plays a big part in all of this, if advertising plays a big part, how are we going to use all that to communicate a message that is an eye-opener, truly? I wish I knew feminism before in my life.
I'm interested you talk about Beyonce and feminism in the same breath. We recently did a programme on World Have Your Say on BBC World Service Radio, talking about whether she could actually be a feminist when she's a woman standing there very scantily clad, shaking herself around when she's dancing. And is that a new breed of feminism, or is that actually setting women's causes back?
I think it is a breed of feminism, of course. It was the whole discussion of the third wave of feminism. There is feminists that embrace themselves as sexual beings and they enjoy it, and that's what she says, and she vindicates that. And I think it's fine, because why can men be sexual subjects and women can't? It's also another brand. I think anything can be feminist as long as it's made in conscience. And we as feminists, it's better if we don't judge other types of feminism, because it's just as oppressive as the regime we're denouncing.
Lots of people getting in touch with us. Kitty Phillips has got in touch from Florida. She has said that educating women is the only way to make the world change. But Kawisha, and I'm scared to say this, ladies, because I don't think you're going to like what he's saying, in Zambia, says that the problem is you can't change sexism. Talking about it will just cause more and more sexism. Is there a problem that if women shout incredibly loud about this, they actually put men's backs up and put the cause back? Chalidapon, I wonder what you think from Thailand.
I think it might not be just shouting, but the fact that we bring up these issues, we are willing to debate, we are willing to kind of like argue or give some examples and these experiences of people, and we just exchange these ideas. It's going to change sexism itself. I believe that talking can change things, because you bring up the issues and people cannot avoid that. People have to address that. Although it's kind of like so annoying for many people when we talk about this issue of gender, sexuality, sexism and everything, but they cannot just deny it. And let me just remind you that remind all of us that sexism might be just annoying experience for many people, but it can affect this livelihood of so many women in this world. So just bring up the issue, talking about it, discussing about it among your friends on social media and everything can change the world. And of course, education will help too.
Yeah, Susan, and I wonder on your, sorry, you wanted to come in anyway, Suzanne, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree. I think that talking about it and actually awareness raising, having discussions about this are absolutely key. They're key to breaking gender stereotypes, to making people think differently than what's been prescribed and what they've been told, by the state, by society, by their parents in schools, by the church, or by religion. It's important, and seeing how other people are living differently, how they're going beyond prescribed gender roles, or how maybe gender roles differ in different societies, are absolutely key to that awareness raising. But I want to bring this other point, that I don't think it's just the job of women to challenge sexism. I think sexism and prescribed gender roles, very strict gender roles, and we see this, in different areas of the world. I mean, gender roles can be, they're not as strict, they're more fluid, but in some places they're very strict. And I think it's not just the job of women to redefine gender roles and to have this conversation, but it's it's the responsibility of both men and women. And I'm very happy to see that this is changing with the younger generation, that we have a lot of men as well who are challenging traditional gender roles and having a conversation about it. And I think social media actually helps this process. It connects people across cultures, across countries, where they can have a free flow of exchange of ideas. And so I just want to point that it's not just the responsibility of women to do this, but it's all of our responsibilities.
Well, Suzanne, it's interesting that you raise that point, because Akbari has got in touch with BBC Persian. He's from Iran, and he says, how can I have a role in the eradication of sexism as a man? So what can men do? If they're watching thinking, okay, I'd like to help, but what can one person do? Suzanne, what would you say they should do?
Well, I mean, I think people can make a change, first of all, in their personal relationships, in their personal lives, right? They can, especially men, I mean, they can begin where there's discrimination, if discrimination is embedded in the law, if it's embedded in society against women, particularly because women do suffer more from discrimination based on sexual, sex differences, biological differences, they can begin to change that. They can treat their mothers, their sisters, their spouses, their friends more equally, right? So that's one level. But they can also try to advocate for changes at a societal level. And I'll give you an example. In Iran, there's been this spate of acid attacks against women. There's a suspicion, it's not a proven suspicion, but it's a suspicion that it's tied to the way that women dress, that women who are perceived as not being veiled enough or not dressing appropriately are the subjects of this violence. And it's terrible violence. It's acid in the face, which just destroys people's sight, their faces. And this has happened in Isfahan, which is a very conservative city in Iran. It's a religiously conservative city. And just yesterday, a large number of people took to the streets. And seeing the videos, I saw that there were a lot of men in those videos demanding equality and safety and security for women from this kind of violence. And so for me, it was incredibly moving to see this. And it was incredibly moving to see it, that it's happening in a city that's traditionally a very conservative city, and to see so many men out there condemning this kind of violence. So I think that people can make changes at the personal level in their personal relationships, and they can also demand societal and legal changes as well, and it's the responsibility of both men and women.
Dua, I want to bring you back in Egypt, because Majid has got in touch with BBC Arabic saying in nearly all Arab countries, societies are very male-dominated, which marginalises women. And people who followed the events of the Arab Spring will be all too familiar with the number of women who were assaulted by groups of men during those protests. What do you think needs to change in Egypt to give women a greater voice and break down that sexism?
Well, yeah, basically many things need to change, and I would be a liar that to say that change can happen overnight or over a day. Yeah, I know that people keep referring to the Arab Spring and the uprising and the women on the front line, all of these like pictures, international media coverage, and all of these things. But I have to say all the time that women in my country and all over the Arab-speaking region, they were there, they were outside and on the front and trying to defend their rights all the time and change this society to more equal and free society. So we've been there, we have been there as women and as men and different genders who believe in on all of these changes. But what we need to change all the time first is that to actually amplify the voices that is requesting change and equality. Because sometimes it's so easy that those voices are overlooked and sided and no one is hearing them or paying attention. So amplifying these voices, and this is what is good about social media, is that it's really gave space for people to talk. But even in this space, we also find sexism and people trying to shut down the voices of women and men asking for all these equal places. And I have to say, some of these voices are not men only. They are also women who are the gatekeeper and the safeguard of the value, what's so-called the values of the society, which honestly speaking, at some point, I don't know what are these values they are talking about.
You talk about social media, and I mean, social media does have a role, of course. You say there that it's breaking down barriers, but many people will be aware that all too often women get seriously abused online. There've been rape threats, death threats, many trolling cases here in the UK and in other countries around the world, where people seem to think that on social media, because it's not face to face, they can say exactly what they like. Gisela, in Mexico, do you think social media can move things forward, or do you think in some ways it's almost a hindrance?
I was going to comment on that, actually. I think this social media is, it's an illusion, the thing that social media is going to liberate us, because of two things. First, it creates an atmosphere where things are emptier. My generation and younger, we consume images and we consume 140 characters on Twitter, and that's it. Our news feedback, it comes from Facebook. So our world is actually getting smaller through social media. I'm quite a pessimist on that. And on the other side, this